Hello everyone, today we are going to learn about thermogenesis. So there are two primary types of thermogenesis in the human body. First is shivering. The first form is through shivering. So that is when your skeletal muscles contract. And when your skeletal muscles are contracting and relaxing, they're doing that fairly quickly, that causes friction. So that uses up quite a bit of ATP. So we also have another form of thermogenesis, and that is called non-shivering thermogenesis. And that is done in brown fat. So I'm just going to write that down, non-shivering thermogenesis. And now what we're going to do is we're going to take a little bit more of a deep dive into brown fat, and we're going to learn the actual biology of this non-shivering thermogenesis. So I am going to draw the inside of a mitochondria right now. So up here we have the intermembrane space of a mitochondria. And down here we have the mitochondrial matrix. I'm just going to write matrix for short. And one of the first things we know about mitochondria is that they're used to create energy, or ATP. And the way that that's done is through the electron transport chain. So I'm just going to write ETC for short. And we know that the electron transport chain, basically what it does is that it creates a gradient of protons, so that there are many, many more protons in the intermembrane space than there are in the mitochondrial matrix. And we know that that's done through these electron carriers like NADH. So NADH is used for its electron, and the power of this electron here pumps the hydrogens into the intermembrane space. And we know that usually the next thing that happens is that there is a enzyme here that we call ATP synthase. And what ATP synthase does is that it takes these hydrogens here that are in quite high concentration in the intermembrane space, and it brings them to the mitochondrial matrix. And that process, because it's going from high concentration of protons to low concentration, that creates energy. That creates energy in the form of ATP. So ADP becomes phosphorylized to ATP. However, in brown fat, we do have ATP synthase in brown fat, but we have another enzyme here. And this other enzyme is called UCP. And that stands for uncoupling protein. So what that does is the protons, they have multiple options. They can continue to go through this ATP synthase, but they can also go through instead this uncoupling protein. And what that does is instead of creating ATP, that creates heat in the form of thermal energy. And that heat warms the body and brings it back, brings the balance back, so that it warms up. Now, this uncoupling protein is only found in brown fat. So now we're going to take a little bit of a deeper dive into brown fat. So one of the first things about brown fat that you need to know is that it is much higher in mitochondria than white fat. And we know that white fat is simply just energy storage. So it does have mitochondria, but not as much as brown fat. And brown fat, the mitochondria are also upregulated in their activity. So they're just more active. They are, creating more energy. They are creating more heat, a lot more active. The other thing we know about brown fat is that it is much higher in infants. So the amount of brown fat that one has is highest when they're an infant, and then it gets kind of smaller and smaller as we age. So you have much more brown fat as an infant than you have now. And one other really interesting fact about brown fat is that it's higher in its amount and in its activity among certain populations of people. And one of those populations is the Inuit peoples of Canada. So the Inuit peoples of Canada are an indigenous peoples of Canada, and they have lived in the north of Canada for thousands of years. And I'm sure, as you can guess, the north of Canada is a very, very cold place. So this increase in brown fat and increase in brown fat activity is an adaptation of the Inuit peoples of Canada to stay warm. So I thought that was just an interesting fact to share, and maybe we can hypothesize of other groups of people that may have higher brown fat because they, their ancestry is from cold places. So I hope you learned a little bit, and